Welcome back. Well, joining us this morning to shed light on the decision yesterday concerning the account of some NSAS protesters that were freezed by the CBN. Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Good morning, sir, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well,
good morning.
Okay, just give us the background. I mean, what is the situation concerning those accounts? Is it that all is now well with those accounts that were freezed from off the NSAS protesters?
With profound respect to the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Justice, Mr. Abubakar Malami Ese, who I just spoken through your medium, I want to believe that he has not been fully briefed with respect to what happened yesterday and in this case. Whereas in October last year, the Central Bank of Nigeria went out of its way to apply for another ex parte to freeze the accounts of the NSAS protesters, 20 of them, 20 among the leaders, on November 4, whereas the Central Bank was asking for 180 days to investigate the 20 people for alleged money laundering and terrorism and sundry offenses. So the court gave the order on the 4th of November. Instead of 180 days, the court gave the Central Bank 90 days to commence and conclude investigation into the accounts or the activities of these young men and women. For the 90 days, throughout the duration of the order, there was no investigation at all. So because no offense was committed, because these young men and women were exercising their freedom of expression, guaranteed by Section 39 of the Constitution and freedom of assembly guaranteed by Section 40. So it was a case of sheer intimidation. But by last week, February 4, the order expired. And so we were in court yesterday to continue with the hearing of the matter. And I informed the court, the order has expired. Of course, the Central Bank had attempted to renew the order. So, no, you cannot renew an expired order. If you wanted to renew, it ought to have been renewed while the order was valid and subsisting. So the court decided to strike out the case yesterday because both sides withdrew all applications pending in court. So the question of filing an appeal does not arise because the order had expired. So the government cannot file any appeal because the government had withdrawn all the applications filed. And so the court struck out the case of the Central Bank. I do hope that sufficient lessons have been learned, particularly by the Central Bank, to desist from jumping into the political arena by attempting to freeze the accounts of people who were involved or who are involved in a struggle one way or the other against the government. For when the Central Bank does that, you have left the business of banking and then you've strayed into the political terrain. And it's a dangerous terrain.
Right. So let's try to break this down. When you say that the CBN got that order, told the courts that, well, we need this order to investigate these accounts or account holders for alleged terrorism and the rest, and the court granted the order. But now you say that within those 90 days, the CBN did not conduct any investigation whatsoever. So does that mean that the CBN misled the court?
Of course. The CBN misled the court into believing that grave offenses had been committed and we needed time to investigate them. And the court said, okay, based on your one-sided story, and for a central bank, no court will not want to give some kind of consideration to the claim of the central bank of a country. And this is the central bank of the largest, black nation on earth, And so the order made the order. The court made the order. But I am saying no offense was committed. No attempt was made by the central bank to investigate anybody. None of my clients was invited for questioning. Because because no offense was committed. And that is why the central bank will have to be more circumspect in future. Because my clients are going to court to challenge the gross violations of their right to property. They were denied access to their bank accounts for over 90 days, which is totally uncalled for, because the government cannot recognize the right of Nigerians to protest. While you turn around to either seize their account or freeze their account or deny them consular services, seize the passport, not allow them to renew their passport and so on and so forth. And that was why I did inform the press yesterday. I suffer from, personally, I was in agony because I was in the forefront of the battle, the titanic battle against military dictatorship in our country. And on no occasion was my account frozen. Even though our passports were seized, we usually, had them returned to us through the court. We were charged with all manners of offenses, including treasonable felony. We admitted to bail in liberal terms. The courts were convinced that we're fighting for the restoration of democracy in our country. And again, this is where I'm going to appeal to our court, our judges, to restrain from granting ex parte orders. The court should now, having regards to our experience, the court should advise those who bring these applications to put the other person on notice.
Right.
Because that was also what happened yesterday with Mr. Last year with Mr. Omoyele Sowore, when the State Security Service approached the Federal Court. We need 90 days to investigate this guy for money laundering, terrorism, and so on and so forth. And the court said, no, I will give you 45 days. Throughout the 45 days, there was no investigation for money laundering on terrorism. So
Mr.
at
Falana,
the end of the day, Sowore was not charged with terrorism.
So, as you have said, there seems to be a pattern here. You've mentioned the case of Mr. Sowore and now the CBN. So, if indeed the court was misled by the CBN, should there be any repercussion from the court? Yes, you say that your clients may go to court or are going to court to challenge this or to get some form of damages. But from the court itself, shouldn't there be some repercussion? Because if there's a trend, then this might happen in the future.
No, I am very sure now with what has happened in some of the cases I've just mentioned. And there are others. I'm sure our courts will now be more careful when these kind of applications, when these sort of applications, are filed in court, having regards to our recent experience, to obviate such gross abuse of the rights of Nigerians. And the court will not lose anything by saying, oh, these are NSAS protesters, oh, this is a political activist. Please, can you put him on notice? So that I will hear both sides before I can make an order. Where you cannot show that a Nigerian there is reasonable suspicion that a criminal offense has been committed, you cannot violate the rights of a Nigerian. And that is the position. So the courts expect us now. The ball is back in our court. And that is why the NSAS protesters have now instructed us, you must please go to court and challenge the violations of our right to property for over 3 months.
Well, one of the things that readily comes to mind now is the role of the judiciary in all of these that we're talking about. Well, some other cases like this, as you have said, have risen, and a number of people are wondering, is there a role for the NBA in all of these, given the fact that on the one hand is the lawyer, on the other hand is you, a lawyer as well, and the issue seems to be something that maybe shouldn't even have gotten that far in the first place. The ex parte order gave the reason of financing terrorism as the reason why those accounts were frozen. And then they were supposed, according to even from what you have also said, ask for an extension of that order of something that was not really real. So the question then is Is there something the legal practice should have done to stave off this kind of thing that, as you have said, is clear violation of human rights?
Well, I think there is a challenge before the bar and the bench. As I did say, I am convinced beyond any shadow of doubt that our course will have to be more circumspect when these type of applications are filed in court or brought to court. With respect to lawyers, again, we have to do what is done in other jurisdictions. I mean, you have just witnessed the attempt by the immediate past president of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, to use the judiciary to endorse his false claim of electoral fraud. About 62 cases were filed. And in many of the cases, the judges threatened to refer the lawyers to the disciplinary committee of the bar in that country. If you cannot prove before me now evidence of electoral fraud, and majority of the lawyers had to withdraw, knowing the implications. And that was why, within 2 months, the American judiciary, the American courts, were able to dismiss up to the Supreme Court all the frivolous cases filed by the Trump group. We must get to that stage here where a lawyer can simply not say, oh, that was my brief from my lawyer. No, you must also.
We hope we'll be able to get Mr. Falana back in this
Also
conversation.
do your homework before you must do your homework or terrorism before I can file this application. Where a lawyer has refused to do that, I also believe that the law allows us to also challenge such lawyers so that we can get our judiciary to be respected. All the cases that embarrass our courts are filed by lawyers, in many cases by senior lawyers. So we've got to a stage now where we have to ensure that lawyers are brought to book. I mean, I know of an instance where a senior lawyer, an attorney general of this country, wrote to the INEC, don't obey a court order. Of course, the bar didn't do anything, but the party involved went to court that this guy is not a fit and proper person to hold any public office in Nigeria. The court, federal also found the man went on appeal, he lost the appeal. So forever, he cannot hold a public office in Nigeria. And this is how it should be. And this is the only way to teach a lesson that you cannot continue to use the court to perpetrate perfidy.
Well, it would seem that the bar has its job cut out for it. I know that there is a disciplinary committee. Let's even wait and see if there is any such thing that's going to be taken to that disciplinary committee. But another question comes to mind here, Mr. Falana, and that is the question of whose errand is the CBN serving here? Whose bidding is the CBN doing when they freeze the accounts of young people who were alleged to have been financing terrorism and they were never investigated because clearly, from what you have said, it's something that didn't happen. Some would say that there is an attempt at some protectionist intentions by the CBN.
No, I would not want to engage in speculation. And it's for you guys in the media to also challenge the central bank. You have done this. Is that the end of the matter? Will you do this again? Will you seize accounts again? Will you freeze accounts again? But in all this, the role of lawyers is so important. The role of lawyers is so important because these frivolous applications are filed by lawyers. I mean, this is not just the only one. There was a lawyer that went to court and got an order that the police should investigate about 50 other NSAS protesters, and including my son. Up till now, and that's about 2 months ago, up till now, nobody has invited any of them because there is no basis. The president of the country has repeatedly maintained that young people, indeed all Nigerians, have the right to protest peacefully. And these guys were protesting peacefully until thugs were unleashed on them in Abuja and Lagos. They even arrested some of the thugs handed them over to the police, but no investigation was carried out. So in this kind of environment in which we have found ourselves, the central bank will have to, I do hope that the central bank will never, ever again involve itself in what is purely a political matter, so that you do not use that bank, you do not discredit that bank that is supposed to be independent, supposed to be autonomous, even of the government, so that it can perform its primary responsibility of acting as a bank of the government.
Well,
Not as an errand boy of the government, shopping for forum shopping for ex parte orders all over the place. Therefore, thereby passing the judiciary.
Mr. Falana, young people, again, they were really angry. I think some of them largely still are with the CBN, this time because of the directive concerning Bitcoin. Because, the CBN has said, look, this connected with terrorism, and some of those young people who are angry think that it's partly linked to the NSAS matter. But can this go as, look, this is different, this is primary responsibility of the CBN?
No, the CBN has nothing to do with Nigerians exercising their freedom of expression, their freedom of assembly. The CBN has nothing to do with it. In fact, this will surprise you. Section 94 of the Electoral Act, 2010 as amended, Section 83 of the new Police Act 2020, have imposed a duty on the police to provide adequate security whenever there is a protest in Nigeria for or against the government. So if that had happened last year, the unfortunate, tragic situation whereby the so-called hoodlums hijacked the protest would not have happened if the police had done its work by ensuring that those unarmed, peaceful protesters were guided in line with the provisions of the law.
Indeed. So largely, you're talking about how there was no investigation into the accounts of the young people that whose accounts were frozen. And indeed, Chamberlain did pose that question about cryptocurrencies, the investigation that was we were not sure if it's an investigation, but the CBN policy that was revived, banks were reminded of. I was wondering whether you saw any connection there between the protests that happened, because some people had made claims that largely the protests were sustained based on the remittances of funds from diaspora through cryptocurrencies. And now we saw, in January or February, we see the CBN coming up to say, banks, we have to remind you that this policy is in existence. Did you see any linkage whatsoever with that particular policy?
Neo-colony. Our country is a satellite of imperialism. It was the United States government that asked the central bank to stop cryptocurrency in Nigeria because, according to the West, a few Nigerians are engaged in some fraudulent practices. And so we didn't, as a country, stand up to challenge the West, the United States of America. But you also have currency in your country. So why are you asking us to stop it? And again, we have to understand that we're operating a democratic system of government, whereby if you are going to stop anybody's right, if you are going to violate anybody's right in the public interest, you must go to court and get a court order founded on facts, not on speculation. And that is the position. That is the position of the law.
You have also...
Even on a military dictatorship, you couldn't arrest me or detain me without a detention order. But under a democratic government, I was listening to somebody else, the government is going to obey the order, not out of intimidation. I beg your pardon. You shouldn't use such language in a democracy. We shouldn't debate whether a government should obey a court order or not. It's given.
I'm wondering how this must be a little personal for you, though. I mean, this particular case, you have been a human rights lawyer for many years. I mean, that's where you earned your stripes. I'm wondering how much of a change would you say the human rights landscape has changed, by in the last couple of years, seeing the sort of cases that you have, and then now, I mean, you also mentioned the fact that your son was, was involved in this, the fact that somebody went to court, to ask that, the accounts of 50 other NSAS protesters be investigated, including your son. How personal is this for you when you look at, the changing landscape of human rights in Nigeria?
Well, I will tell you that very unfortunately, we're almost back to the dark days of full military dictatorship in Nigeria. And I had an occasion last year with respect to the case of Showore, Colonel Dasuki and others, to remind President Muhammadu Buhari that as a military dictator, he complied with all court orders for the release of Nigerians. And I listed about 13 cases where the court made orders for the release of Nigerians under the State Security Detentions of Persons Decree number 2 of 1984. So I was therefore, including my humble self, I was detained and the court said, release him. And I was released. Under President, the military president, General Ibrahim Babangida, were detained several times, were charged even with reasonable felon. The court said release them on bail, who were released. I therefore could not fathom how a democratic government will say, we are not going to obey court orders on the basis of national security. It was unheard of, even under the military, not to talk of a democratic government. But the point I'm making, I can tell you this. On paper, formally, we have one of the best human rights law regimes in the world. Chapter 4 of the Constitution, African Charter on Human and People's Rights, Law Anti-Torture Act, Admission of Criminal Justice Act, all of them. But they are served in their breach by the government, because I believe very strongly that the government has not appreciated that we are not a conquered people. Otherwise, you will not be saying, oh, we're not going to obey a court order because of national security. It is who determines national security? It is the court. Based on facts made available to it, the court will say, oh, we may not even have a hearing in the open court if you can show that having public hearing will offend or will affect negatively the security of the state. The court will say, okay, we shall hear you in chambers. But that is not the issue. Somebody will just make a pronouncement in the Ministry of Justice. We are not going to comply with that order on the basis of national security. How dare you, in those days, make such... you will find yourself in Kuje prison or Kirikiri for making such an outlandish, contemptuous statement that has the capacity to make people disrespect our court. No, it shouldn't come from the government. So we have a good human rights regime on paper, but we have a terrible human rights record. And Nigerians must begin to hold government accountable. You can't have people, for instance, the right to life is the most precious, is the most important fundamental right, because you need to be alive to enjoy other rights. So you can't have a situation as personally where somebody or some people will be going around with AK-47 rifles, killing people, and the government will not hold them responsible and charge them with murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and the rest of them.
All right, then, Mr. Falana. Well, we do thank you. Oh boy, we keep going, keep losing you and then coming back. But we do thank you for your perspectives this morning, Mr. Femi Falana, Senior Advocate of Nigeria.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.
All right. Well, back in a moment, we'll be talking about security. You saw the perspective of what happened in the National Assembly. Those also will be part of our conversation coming up next.